Recently, a heated debate has raged about whether or not Zambia needs International Monetary Fund support for its Economic Stabilisation and Growth Program, dubbed Zambia Plus. What then is Zambia Plus?
I think a good starting point would be that the year 2015 and 2016 were very difficult years for Zambia from an economic perspective. And some of the drivers of the challenges that we had in those 2 years was, one, we had presidential elections during that period. Number two, we also suffered from the collapse of commodity prices. And then three, climate change in its broadest perspective. So consequently, as a result of climate change, our power generation capacity was down by 50%. It also had some impact on agriculture. We ended up with 2016 with most of the economic fundamentals going in the wrong direction. Our target of growth could not be reached. Indeed, we were only able to get below 3%. Our reserves were down. Inflation was up. Our reserves were low. So given that particular background and understanding the challenges that we had faced in those 2 years, we as government took a decision that we needed to begin to stabilize the economy as a basis of growth, identifying what is it that was significantly slowing down the economy, particularly in 2015 and 2016. So we took critical reform decisions. And one of the reform decisions that we took was the removal of subsidies on fuel, driving it to market pricing. Two, we also took a decision to have tariffs begin to migrate to cost-reflective tariff. Three, we also transformed the whole agriculture space, removing the subsidy and the wastage that was inherent in FISIP, and insisting that for 2018, we're going to go e-voucher. The totality of this subsidy impacted on 2016 to the extent of almost $1 billion were out of pocket because of subsidies. And being out of pocket, this filtered through in a number of areas. For example, the arrears for most of the suppliers, the contractors, including retirees, pensioners, ballooned to the extent that we had over 17 billion in arrears of payments. Two, most of the work that were being undertaken, whether they are roads, whether they are clinics, hospitals, schools, most of them stopped because there was no liquidity available to be able to meet the obligations that government had. And because of the fiscal pressure that was on the budget, we were only anchored by monetary policy. So the anchorage of monetary policy had the consequence of escalating the cost of money, one. And also, the consequence of monetary policy was to lift up the policy rate and the reserve ratio. And consequently, the liquidity space in the economy was narrowed. So the private sector was not able to borrow. The private sector was not able to function in the correct way. Government in turn suffered because when the private sector is not functional, they are also not able to pay taxes. And when they don't pay us taxes, we are also not able to pay the suppliers of goods and services. So we needed to break that vicious circle. So the formulation of the 2017 budget, called Zambia Plus, was one to fundamentally address the deformities that were in the economy. realizing that we needed to take the hard decision in order to break the vicious cycle. And the pillars of Zambia Plus was one is, how can we address and enhance domestic resource mobilization? Attacking compliance, administration, but bringing in systems and broadening the tax base as pillar number one. Number two, we're also conscious that the reforms are going to impact particularly on the vulnerable people. So how do we deal with the whole issue of social protection? Issues around cash transfers to protect the most vulnerable. Issues around when you change the electricity tariff, how do you make sure that the very vulnerable are also able to access power? We also said one of the things that we must do was regain control of expenditure. So it's basically called prudent expenditure management, prudent economic management as a key anchor. And the fourth one was that because of the difficulties that we had previously, the deviation from the budget was quite large. So we needed to restore the credibility of the budget, going forward. And the last pillar was, it was important that we achieve stability. It was important that we begin to grow the jobs. It was important that we use that as a platform to grow the economy in a sustainable manner. So these 5 pillars constituted the Zambia Plus. So that is what is Zambia Plus. It's basically having stability as your first platform, and then growth as the second platform.
What has been the impact of Zambia Plus so far?
So far, 2017, the 6 months, we have been able to achieve relative stability. The economic fundamentals, whether you are talking about inflation in single digits, below 7%, the exchange rate, it has broken the psychology barrier of 9 kwacha. The reserves are on the upswing. Even the initial forecast that we had for GDP has actually been projected, upwards. So that stability is critically important, and some of the reasons that are driving the stability is one, that we took also the courageous decision to begin to address the arrears to contractors, to providers of services, including payments to the pensioners, so that it creates the liquidity that is necessary to begin to turn the economy going forward. And because the monetary policy was too tight, the commingling of monetary policy and fiscal policy was disjointed. So by fiscal consolidation, the central bank eased the monetary policy, and as you know, in the first 6 months, they brought down the reserve ratio and the policy rate to 12.5%. That has allowed, one, the beginning of a climb down of the cost of money, two, the injection of additional liquidity to enable the private sector, the ones that grow the economy, the ones that grow the job, to begin to have some oxygen to run their companies as a basis to begin to grow those things. In addition, in the first 6 months, we have seen significant investments that are coming, particularly in energy, in agriculture. Those are critically important to create the jobs and to begin to support the stability as a basis of growth. So now we are at a stage where we need to enhance particularly domestic revenue mobilization to continue to meet the targets that we set for ourselves. That these targets are critically important, and you are able to raise money, you're not going to attack your fiscal deficit. You can control expenditure, but the key driver is revenue, domestic revenue mobilization. And we have done a couple of things, and we're going to do a number of things, particularly by the end of this year. one of the things that we're doing with Zambia Revenue Authority is that it is not prudent to be able to celebrate that we are owed so much money and we have been owed so much money for so many years. You're choking the private sector. So we took the decision that we're going to declare an amnesty. An amnesty to be able to write off the penalties and interest, to allow breathing space for the private sector, not only to pay their taxes, but also to allow them the space to be able to continue to function and grow their business. So that amnesty is beginning to yield some results. Two, we are working on what we're calling the single window. The single window simply means that when you're exporting, like Zambia exports a lot more, ensuring that the transit time, the bureaucracy, the hurdles at points of transit, the borders, are basically minimized. We don't want to lock the economy in containers because we have the inefficiency associated with the exit route. So we're collapsing the various institutions into one to enable us reduce the transit time. Our target is to make sure that within 12 hours, we are able to process a truck. We are not yet there, but that is a target that we've got. We are also going to put physical devices, what we're calling physical devices, to boost VAT collection, because as you know, most of the shops, small, medium, and big, the amount of VAT that they're giving us, we're not saying it's not correct, but we need to have an independent process that verifies that that amount that has been declared is the correct amount. We are not a government of declaring suspicions. All we are saying that transparency and accountability should be the guiding principle. So we are doing that. We also took the decision that as we dismantle the arrears to the contractors and suppliers of services, we have appointed agents. For example, the National Roads Fund as an agent. So as they pay the contractor, they also pay Zambia Revenue Authority their component of VAT. As ZESCO pays for their supplies for the contractors, they also retain the VAT component. So we have seen that in 2017, VAT has become a positive tax. In 2016, VAT was a negative tax. It was a negative tax because most of it was locked in what was owed to the contractors one. But even when they were paid, they were not passing on the VAT component. So we are doing those measures and much more. And principally because this is a critical pillar of Zambia Plus. The first pillar is mobilization and enhancing domestic revenue collection. So that is the formulation that we have got for this year. And that's why we're calling it Zambia Plus. It's an economic stabilization and growth program to begin to restore, in a simple phrase, physical fitness of the economy.
Is IMF support necessary for Zambia Plus?
I think IMF must be seen in its proper context. And let me explain to the people of Zambia that the last program that we had for IMF was 2008 to 2011. And if most of you are asked, I would say 80 to 90% don't even remember that we had an IMF program in those 3 years up to 2011. And the results of that particular program was that the economic fundamentals were quite strong. We only remember the IMF of the 1990s. The austerity, the conditionality, etc., etc. So everybody will associate IMF with, lifeboat shop, with the minimum shortages, queues at ZCBC, and those. That is the old IMF. The new IMF, its members, including Zambia, said IMF cannot continue to be a global leader in managing the global economy if it continues behaving the way it was behaving in the past as a prefect. So the new IMF focuses on country leadership. The new IMF focuses on dealing with issues of poverty, minimizing inequalities. The new IMF deals with issues around sustainable fiscal balances, that you go to get the economy fit. So in order to get the economy fit, IMF becomes part of the process. But our engagement as Zambia with IMF has been on the basis of a homegrown program called Zambia Plus, our own program. And the reason we're bringing in IMF is, one, to support our external sector, the balance of payment support. Also to enhance investor confidence. Also to enhance budget support. But to begin to get the economy in a physical order. But what is also more important is that we're members of the club, entitled to the benefits of belonging to the club. And you may wish to know that we're the third largest contributor in Africa to IMF. So why don't you take advantage to the benefits of being a senior member of a club? So the program with IMF is under our control. We have shifted from the preconditionality era of saying you must, to benchmarking. And all we are saying in that program is, for example, that you are going to maintain your fiscal deficit not more than 7.4% of GDP for 2017. Is the answer yes or no? We said yes, and that was our number. You are going to ensure that your debt levels are kept within sustainable parameters. And we say yes. You are going to ensure that you put in social protection mechanisms such as social cash transfer. The answer is yes. You are going to remove the tariffs, which have already, the subsidies on tariffs and fuel. The answer. So those are decisions that are taken by ourselves and not anybody else. So there's nothing like an IMF program. There's only a Zambian program. So all they are doing is monitoring the things that we have said ourselves we are going to do. So there's no worry. We are in control. We are the masters of our program. We are the masters of the implementation. We are the masters of driving that program. So we are in charge. And we'll remain in charge and in control and accountable, because we're the ones that are accountable to the people of Zambia. If we fail, it's government that is going to be held responsible. So we are the ones that must take the decisions on everything that we do. And that's why we have got our own homegrown program as the basis of engagement. As the basis of telling IMF, this is what we can be able to do in 2017, 2018, 2019, and going forward. Because that is what is called country leadership. Without country leadership, my dear friend, without country ownership, nothing gets done. So you must feel it, you must own it in order to deliver. And we say we own it. It is our program. Everybody else, including the IMF, are just there to support the direction that we have cast for ourselves. The donors are just here to support. The primary responsibility remains with the people of Zambia through their government to lead the recovery. And nobody will dispute that we need to recover, we need to grow the economy. Are you going to dispute that we need to have higher GDP? There will be no dispute, isn't it? Are you going to dispute that we need to have more liquidity in the economy? We need to bring the cost of money down. Are you going to have a dispute? We need to create jobs. I think most Zambians have no disputes for that. So the debate should be, how can they help and think together with government, collective wisdom, how can we enhance this performance so that it's much more solid, it's much more injecting, it's much more inclusive, for the people of Zambia? That is a critical point. That should be the debate. Let's bring ideas to the table. Than engaging in pedestrian debates about the program. What program? It's your decision to live better. Work on it. And that's what it's all about. So there's no such thing as a program. There's only a Zambian program.
If Zambia does not access IMF aid, how much fiscal space do we have, considering that the wage bill and interest rate payments take up a huge chunk of the national budget?
The issue is not even so much whether you need or you don't need. I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding. What we need is support from a number of quarters, including IMF, in order to stabilize and grow the economy. What we need is support from the cooperating partners, the EU, to support our budget, ADB to support our budget. You can't begin to say that we don't need it. How are you going to grow the economy? We don't need China. How are you going to grow the economy? We don't need the EU. How are you going to grow the economy? Our economy is so small. So the issue is not selecting A, B, C, or D. It's a combination of everybody in order for us to grow the economy. So the debate shouldn't be aimless about selecting. How can you select when you're so poor? We're not yet there. Until we get there, the choices are limited. So let's not have this idle debate, do we need, we do. That's not even the debate. The debate is that how do we grow, stabilize and grow the economy? How do we create the jobs? How do we bring in investment? That should be the argument. Soon you'll be hearing people saying, no, we don't need China. We don't need Germany. Is that the argument? No. Those are idle conversations. Deal with the substance and the fundamentals, which is growing the economy, let it be inclusive, create the jobs, inject happiness in the people of Zambia. That's all they're looking for. And not a debate that ends up bringing them down. That is, for me, totally unnecessary. And I don't want to encourage the people of Zambia to be spending time in aimless conversations. Let's deal with the conversion of ideas into implementation, because that is what is going to make a change to the people, to the economy, and to the Vision 2030. Unless we begin to do those concrete things, the Vision 2030 can remain a pipe dream. We're in a hurry to push the agenda forward. We'll remain insulated of this conversation. We are focused on what we must do. We are holding the steering wheel very firmly that, we're driving this economy until it gets there. That is our job.